This is the Quantum Biology Podcast, where we break down the practical health applications of this emerging science, starting with healthy light habits and going wherever the quantum superhighway takes us. In this episode, we talk to Dr. Francisco Gutierrez, a physician with over 25 years of experience in internal medicine. He has won numerous awards for his patient-centered work, including being named top physician by the Consumer Research Council of America. In this interview, Dr. Gutierrez shares his journey through the healthcare industry, how he came to expand his view of health to include a quantum biologic paradigm, and the realization that to practice medicine the way he wanted to, he'd have to set up his own business. Dr. Gutierrez explains his approach to metabolic health and breaks down the process of becoming a startup doctor. This is a good one. Hello, Dr. Gutierrez. Wonderful to see you. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Meredith. I'm happy to be here.
Right. So give us a quick rundown. You started, you were born in El Salvador, is that correct?
That is correct.
And then you rose to the heights of hospital administration in the US. And now you're independent. So could you give us a quick overview of that journey?
Sure. So, I was born in El Salvador, back a few decades ago. And then I went to medical school actually in El Salvador. And then I came in, did my residency and chief residency in New York City. So my specialty is internal medicine. I'm board certified in internal medicine. And I came to work in Rhode Island as a internal medicine physician, primary care, in the year 2000. And since then, I've pretty much seen a lot of the evolution of the medical system here in the United States. I started as a solo practitioner, within the insurance industry. And then that went well until it didn't go well. Then I was kind of forced to sell out into a group practice, and that went well until it didn't go well. And then I became an employed physician in a big hospital system where I kind of rose through the ranks and became basically an executive on the administrative side. And that went well until it didn't go well. And then it's I say that with a grain of salt, but it's the nature of our business where it is becoming very difficult to be yourself as a medical doctor. So then I left. I thought I was kind of, I was kind of like not in limbo, but I was kind of like trying to figure out how to continue my career. And then I was out of practice, so to speak, for maybe a year. And then I came back and I went to work for a urgent care in primary care office or company here in Rhode Island. And then COVID came. And then that's when I said, when I came back, I came down with COVID. It was kind of like a reckoning, trying to figure out how to continue my career. When I was recovering from COVID, this was the first wave before any vaccines. And, I wasn't deathly ill, but I was ill enough that it took me a couple of weeks to recover. I didn't have the appetite to come back into the medical system. And I was trying to figure out a way to continue my career because I think I'm still young and I had acquired all this knowledge and wisdom as far as what we're going to talk about, the mitochondria and light, sunlight, and quantum biology, that I decided I needed, it wasn't a good idea for me just to die with this knowledge and not apply it. But I couldn't. At the same time, I understood that within the medical system, it was impossible for me to apply these concepts, the way that I think it would be appropriate for my patients. So then that's when I said, okay, so we're going to do a reset. I talked to my wife. She was very supportive. And I left the medical system and I founded Solimar Direct Health, which is basically a direct primary care practice. So we don't we're kind of outside. Well, we are outside the medical system in the sense of that we don't take insurance. It's a membership. So I charge a monthly fee for the members, and what that allows me is to make a living, but also allows me the creativity to apply the concepts that I learned through my journey around quantum biology and mitochondrial health and sunlight, et cetera. So that's like a brief story of how I got here.
Wow, that's an incredible journey. And I'm impressed because, each time you said it went well until it didn't, it went well until it didn't. Like, you were able to reframe things, reinvent yourself, do what needed to be done to move on to the next phase, which is a skill that not everyone possesses. So you're a great role model in that way. But I'm also hearing you say that the medical system is changing and changing and changing. And it seems like it's really difficult for doctors. You go to medical school, you'll get your degree, you're told, okay, go practice. And it sounds to be almost like it's difficult to keep up with an industry, which it has become, I would say, that is changing so quickly. And how to make a living, how to serve your patients, how to fit all those pieces together. Probably most doctors have student loans to pay off. It seems like it's become a much more complex endeavor than maybe it used to be. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a monster now. I'm qualified to give an opinion because I have not only been working and practicing from the clinical standpoint, but I've also been in charge of different administrative programs from hospital systems, where the complexities of taking care of patients they just continue to become harder and harder and harder and harder for the patients and for the doctors too. So, and when I started back in the year 2000 as a solo practitioner within the system, nobody was employed. No doctors were employed. Now, pretty much every doctor is employed by these hospital systems. And unfortunately, what that creates is it's an environment where the customer is not the patient, but the customer is the employer. And I say that because I lived it, and I lived it from both ends, from the clinical end and from the administrative end. So it's really, when you look at the statistics and you look at the rate of burnout for physicians, and sadly the rate of suicide by physicians, it's astounding, and it speaks to what you said, that a lot of the doctors, certainly the doctors of my generation, we didn't sign up for this. We signed up to be a physician. We didn't sign up to be an employee of a big corporation.
Right. It's a completely different game, and it's sort of changed mid-career for a lot of you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I know also that from a patient standpoint, I moved to the United States in 2019, and we had health insurance through my husband's work. And I would go on the website to find out what doctor I was allowed to make an appointment with that would be covered. And, being who I am, I was trying to find the ones who had the most sort of quote unquote alternative mindset. And it got to the point where I was looking at physicians with different nationalities, because I know that certain being trained in other countries are more open to certain types of things. And I was trying to find ways to play that system in order to have a doctor who would agree to do a vitamin D panel, or who would be open to supplements instead of drugs, or all these kinds of things. So even from a patient standpoint, it's gotten really complicated, and you're kind of fed a provider regardless of your personal preferences or needs.
Right, exactly. And the interesting thing, now doing direct primary care for a year and a half now, is that neither the patients nor the doctors know that there's an alternative. It's like, it. And I speak that from my perspective before, and oftentimes I used to say, well, there's got to be a better way. I can't stand this. What am I doing? Especially after learning all the stuff that I learned about the mitochondria and sunlight, and there's got to be a better way. It's got to be a better way. And lo and behold, there was a better way. I just didn't.
It's funny when you ask a question, you get an answer. The world is interesting that way.
Right, exactly.
What is a better way? Oh, look, here it is.
Yeah, right,
let's make one. If there isn't, we can build one, right? I think that's the other thing too, is that we get very locked into the way things have been or the way things are, especially with something that seems as monolithic as the healthcare industry, right? It just is so overwhelming. Right. It seems impossible that you could carve out something different, and yet you did.
Right. It speaks to the fact that that's how they program us. They program you, the patients, and us, the doctors, in a certain way, and then you think that it's the only way. But no, there, as you very well know, there are other ways of treating diabetes without having to resort to drugs. Certainly we can use drugs, but that's not the only answer. There are certain ways of treating hypertension the same way. It doesn't have to be a very monolithic way. There are, in the same vein, there are ways to practice medicine where you don't have to be beholden by the medical system. There are, and that's legitimate. And at the end of the day, what answers the question is the results that you get by doing the things that you decide to do. And a year and a half out, I have results both on the clinical end and on the business end. So, it's like, doing something completely different than what I was programmed for many, many, many years.
Yes. And I want to get into that because, as I mentioned to you before we did the podcast, in the community that I'm involved with, right, in the quantum biology collective. And we have a lot of people who hear from a lot of doctors who are at a crossroads. They know that what they're doing is not serving their patients. They know that they are personally unhappy. They are sort of chafing under the stringent rules of working within a hospital system, which more and more of them are now. Like there are even fewer and fewer sort of independent doctors that can take insurance. And yet, as we just said, it's like, okay, so what do we do? What's next? So I want to unpack your journey in two ways. And first, let's start with the paradigm shift that you made in terms of health. And then we'll get into the paradigm shift that you made in terms of structuring your business so that you can continue to serve patients and earn a living. So in terms of the paradigm, I think we have a lot of traditionally trained allopathic doctors who understand there's something more. And the logical next step a lot of them take is to become a functional medicine doctor. Now, what we are talking about here in terms of a quantum biologic approach to health is a step even beyond that.
Yeah, that's right.
So could you explain from your point of view what that means?
Sure, absolutely. So let's start by my journey into the paradigm, right? Because I went through those same steps, except that I kind of bypassed the functional medicine step. But so in the year 2007, I had just turned 41 years old, and I woke up with some neurological symptoms that ended up being a stroke. And at the time, as you know, because I've told the story before, I was a squash champion, state champion. I was starting to get into cycling. But that opened my eyes. I said, because I thought I was doing the things right, according to what I had been taught. Turned out I wasn't, but I thought I was. And then I tried to figure out, well, why did I come down with a stroke? And then I said, well, I asked two questions. Well, one is either I didn't pay attention in class, and I didn't think that was the answer, or two, maybe they didn't teach me all that I really needed to learn. So that is what kind of opened up my mind and to try to investigate how things really work. And that was 2007. So I went along, and then I started learning a little bit about nutrition, and I understood that I didn't get any instruction in nutrition. So I kind of changed my diet, and I kind of was improving in my health that way. That opened my eyes. But every time I try to apply some of these concepts that I had learned, it was impossible for me to, like, patients would come to me in my office in the exam room and ask me, oh, wow, you look great. What did you do? Well, I don't have an hour to tell you. I only have 5 minutes and I'm already an hour behind. It's like, I sometimes think that that's kind of done by design, because the system doesn't want you to like engage patients in that way. So it becomes a lot easier to just write for a pill than get into that conversation. But anyway, so then it was around the year 2012 that I heard a podcast from Dr. Jack Cruz. And then I didn't understand what he was saying. And, I thought at the beginning he was like talking gibberish. I didn't understand. but it kind of, I'm one of these people that when I'm curious about something, I go and do my own diligence. So I did some research and read some of the books and articles that he recommended. And then I had known about the mitochondria from a third grade level and then medical school level. And yeah, the powerhouse of the cell, Yeah, sure. And then the aha moment that I had was when I suddenly realized what everybody knows, but nobody really realizes, that the mitochondria makes energy by the electron transport chain. So everybody knows that, but nobody understands what electrons are and how they work, right? So then, if it dawned on me what Dr. Cruz was trying to say, it's if the mitochondria is it's important for our health, and it works with electrons, and electrons are programmed by photons, and the mitochondria uses protons also, then you have to understand the physics. You have to understand quantum physics, basically, or at least the concepts. So that's what really kind of like, that was my trajectory to understand. And then the other aha moment that I had was, well, many aha moments, but in a linear way, was that the mitochondria has its own DNA, and that the DNA comes in like groups like called haplotypes, and it depends on where your mother comes from and your mother line comes from. Then you're going to have a different type of mitochondrial function. Like, for example, I come from Central America, El Salvador. So my mitochondria works a little bit different than maybe your mitochondria, America. So that the insight that gave me was what modern medicine, the one that I was trained in, says that it is a truth. Randomized placebo-controlled trials, you can't really randomize people because you don't know what their mitochondrial haplotype is. And it gets even deeper than that, because the mitochondrial DNA, even if they've done studies in twins where the one letter change in the mitochondrial DNA in identical twins makes their epigenetics be completely different. So then that's when I started to say, well, what has been fed to me as a truth, and the only truth for so long, maybe it's not necessarily the only truth. It's that all these things were going into my brain, and that's when I kind of like understood. Well, now I understand why I had the stroke. Now I understand why I've had patients that come to me with certain ailments, and I'm not able to help them because I was only given one set of tools in the toolbox, but I don't have other tools within the toolbox that I need to apply to help my patients. And that's basically that realization is basically what led me to finally break off and construct the program that we use here at Solimar to help patients. We use elements from allopathic medicine, but we also use all these elements that you and I have been talking about for the last few months, and it's all complementary. So that's basically like an outline of how I got here.
Wow. So when you made the leap to look at what's going on in the human body from the perspective of quantum physics, could you dig into that a little bit further? Because the consensus within the mainstream scientific community is that quantum mechanical processes do not happen in living systems, i.e. warm, wet environments. And
Right.
there's been a lot of research to show that that is perhaps incorrect. But how were you able to make that leap, putting together Dr. Cruz's work with your own experience? Like, what allowed you to say, okay, wait a minute, there may be an entirely different paradigm that we can be using here?
Yeah. So once I understood the mitochondria, the electron transport chain, then I knew. So electrons are the realm of quantum physics, right? Electrons, photons, and protons. So then I understood that I needed to understand that. But the second thing was when I finally understood the circadian clock in our system that responds to sunlight, it responds to light. So that's also quantum physics. That translates photons inside your eye and your skin via these things called melanopsin, which are photoreceptors, translates and makes them into basically electricity, and that really controls all the programs that we have inside our body. That's those two things. They have to be quantum, and there's no other way. Now I'm aware that the physicists say that the quantum coherence and all that other stuff doesn't happen in our biology is way too messy. But if you read, I think Khalil is his name, and also if you read Nick Lane, Khalil is, I think he wrote a book. He and another person wrote a book. Yeah, the Life on the Edge is, and they make the case with proof that quantum phenomena happen all the time. It's just not they don't happen exclusively. They because biology doesn't need. There you go.
Just for anyone watching on YouTube, or if you're doing the audio, I have here a copy of Scientific American from April 2022. New research is revealing the biophysical basis of birds' incredible migration skills. So the quantum mechanical effect in animals was proven because that's how birds, it is now clear that's how birds migrate. They use quantum processes.
That's correct. And you also, it's important to understand historical perspective of what the quote unquote experts say. There was a time when in medicine, when the medical experts said that the hypophysis and the pituitary and the hypothalamus were not important because they didn't know what it did. They just said, oh yeah, it's just a remnant from evolution. That's crazy.
This is all we know, so it must be all that's true.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. So, there was a point in my life where I was not as open-minded, just because of the way that I was programmed. But when you really read and read and read and read, and you actually also when I deal with patients and try to understand their ailments, there's got to be something else. I mean, it's not just what they taught me, and it's not just what the guidelines say. It's got to be something else.
Yes. Okay, so we've now reached the point in your journey where you have accepted that there is another approach to health. It's a quantum biologic approach. So this means that all kinds of things that we maybe weren't thinking about are really, really important, like the kind of light we're getting, the kind of environment we're living in. So in your particular case, you mentioned that you had a stroke, which was surprising to you because you were eating well and exercising and following traditional guidelines of being healthy. So tell us, and you said, and then you realized you were doing a bunch of stuff wrong. So tell us what those things were that you were doing wrong before you understood.
Yeah. So I understood that exercise was probably a buffer to everything, right? So I was an exerciser. I mean, I still am, much less than I used to be, and I thought, because I played squash. Squash is one of the, I think at one point Forbes magazine named squash as the number one fitness sport in the United States. And also, it was the number one sport for sudden death because it's so intense. And that turned out not to be the case. And in fact, the program that I designed includes exercise, but it's sort of like a pyramid. And we can talk about that a little later if you want. But the foundation is circadian health. And then the top of the pyramid is exercise, which is important, but it's not foundational. The foundational is circadian health because that relates to the health of the mitochondria, and that's what we need. So I did not have that foundation. I basically lived my life indoors, except finally when I started taking up cycling, and I think that over time I didn't appreciate the fact that cycling outside actually was more important than the adjustments I did to my diet. So my diet wasn't really that bad. I mean, I wasn't like a McDonald's, I wasn't eating fast food, but I did eat a lot of, carbohydrates, a lot of simple carbs, like a lot of rice, a lot of beans, a lot of bread, like the white bread. That was mainly my sin as far as diet is concerned. But my major sin is that I was indoors. My life was an indoor life, basically. Those are the things that. So I had my pyramid completely in reverse, and although I did have the top of the pyramid correct, I ended up with a stroke, and it took me 15 years to understand that. But that's the reality. That's exactly what happened. And what we do now in the office with our program is we work on the foundation, which is circadian health, which in turn is mitochondrial health. And the bigger the foundation, the better you'll be.
Could you explain the circadian foundation a little bit more? When you have a new patient who's like, what are you talking about? What do you mean go out? Right. Give me a pill.
So I explained to them this way. So look, first of all, just because you have let's pretend that you're my patient. Just because you haven't heard about this doesn't mean that it's not important. Number one, that was the 2017 Nobel Prize in medicine and physiology, the molecular mechanisms of our body clock. So then I explained to them, our body clock is the symphony. I mean, the director of the symphony that is our metabolism. So, and then I explained to them this way too. Just as an engine has a timing belt, Ferrari or Lamborghini or Nissan Sentra has a timing belt for the engine to work correctly. If the timing belt is off, it doesn't matter if you put jet fuel or if you run it, the engine's going to eventually break. So our timing belt is our body clock. But the problem with the body clock is that it needs to be synchronized every day because otherwise it won't run correctly. So the way that we synchronize it is, the major way to synchronize it is by sunlight at different times of the day, but the most important one is around sunrise, and darkness at night. That's number one. And number two is the timing that you eat. And because we're made to eat at a certain time during the day, during daylight, not at nighttime. And those studies have been done. I mean, they've done a remarkable study where they infuse the same amount of glucose for a period of time, and no change in glucose as the evening progresses. The glucose starts to build up in the blood, because the pancreas doesn't work the same way. Insulin doesn't work the same way as it does at night as it does during the day. These are all published studies in Science. So we tell them that. And the third thing is how to connect to the earth, or grounding, because we have sensors in our bodies that can tell the time of day and the time of season by just connecting to the earth. If we get that, then we build that circadian foundation, and we do that every single day. Then the director of the symphony can direct the symphony perfectly. That's 85%. That's how I explain to them. And then, the other way to explain, it depends on the person, but I have people that come here and they say, well, but I eat well. And I can tell that they eat well just by looking at their labs, but their vitamin D is trash. So then right off the bat, I say, well, yeah, your problem is not the food that you eat. It's not that you don't exercise. It's the fact that you're indoors too much. And then just give me a couple of months and just do what I tell you. And what we tell them is nothing like sophisticated. We just say, just go outside barefoot at sunrise. It's not, there's no like, it's nothing really like hard to do. Just do it. And we've had some incredible results. And they when they come after just 1 month, they open their eyes and say, wow, I didn't know I could feel so good. I didn't know that, lost 10 pounds just by doing that. And sure, we made some tweaks to their diet, but it's just based on how we're designed to function. I and you didn't invent this. We just read the manual. That's just the way it is,
Yeah, it's incredible. And I think sometimes the simplicity of it almost works against it, because it seems like, well, I've been trying to lose this weight for so long, or I've been trying to get my energy back for so long, and you're just telling me to go outside in the morning with bare feet. And
right.
That's all. Make that change. It feels like it should be more complicated, but I guess it's life that has become more complicated. Humans are actually quite simple. We're supposed to eat during the day and be outside and sleep at night in the dark.
That's it. You got it. That's the foundation. That's the foundation. And then what you eat needs to be a supplement of sunlight. I've heard just recently, Dr. Cruz say it this way, the same way that I've been saying it. It's not about getting nutrition. It's not about, certainly, there are certain nutrients that we can't make, like vitamin C, for example, that we need to get from the diet, and DHA, obviously, that's a major one. But the point of food is not getting the nutrients. It's getting back the sunlight, because we're not tethered to the earth under the sun 24/7 like plants are. We move. So then we need to, and we're way more complex than plants. So we have to get the sunlight back. When you look at what the mitochondria does, and even before it gets the what we eat gets into the mitochondria, it's looking for the electrons in the food. That's why it's called the electron transport chain. It's not called the calorie transport chain or the carbohydrate transport chain. That's all it's doing, is looking for electrons programmed by the sun and the earth. That's it. It's that simple.
So what does that mean in terms of choosing what food to eat?
That's what I explain to patients this way, right? Because that's another half truth that we have been fed, is about calories, right? So don't understand where the calories came into biology. It doesn't make any sense. A calorie is a unit of heat that was invented to describe heat energy when building steam engines for ships in the 1800s. That's what a calorie is. How did it come into and I have no idea. But I explain to people this way. So let's pretend that you have a Ferrari, and then you're going to put fuel in the Ferrari, right? So I say, a gallon of gasoline has the exact same amount of calories that 10 pounds of coal. Same amount of calories, 30,000 calories. You can look it up. Now, you wouldn't dream of putting coal into your Ferrari engine. Why not? It's cheaper, has the same amount of calories, and then you'll tell me, no, you're silly. I mean, I'm going to break the motor, right? So why are you putting coal into your Ferrari engine by eating potato chips or eating stuff that doesn't have the fuel that we need, which is sunlight? And then I make the point. Okay, so now when you eat, just look for foods in the supermarket or farmer's market or wherever you buy your food that are programmed by the sun and the earth, like vegetables, depending on the seasonal fruits, or the animal that ate those foods. But a bag of potato chips that was created in a lab that has no sunlight, and what that does, when you're not putting the fuel that your body is looking for, then your body thinks, oh my God, there's no sunlight, there's no energy. So then I better start turning on programs like high insulin and high uric acid and all other programs that get turned on that make you gain fat, because those programs served us well when we didn't have enough food, when there was a real famine. That's how this works. So people say that obesity is excess energy. Obesity is not excess energy, it's lack of energy, because your mitochondria is looking for the sunlight and you're not giving it to her. So then it gains fat. That's how this works.
Incredible. So tell us a little bit about some of the results that you've seen with the patients who've come to your new clinic.
So, at the very beginning, when I designed the program, and I actually opened the office as a primary care doctor under a different business model. So it just, along the way, I say, well, I have the opportunity now, so I'm going to design this program based on these concepts that we've been discussing, and I'm going to put it to work with patients. That kind of like that's how the brand evolved, if you will. It's like I didn't start out to do this like exactly the way we're doing it. It just evolved based on the results. So at the very beginning, when I put these concepts to work with patients, I didn't have much expectation other than, maybe get people to feel better and, improve some of the numbers in the bloodstream, because, I'm still trained allopathically, right? So I've been trained a very specific way. So then, I very early on, I have a patient came as a new patient. He wasn't feeling well. He's thin, and then he, I diagnosed him with type 2 diabetes, and his sugar was like 500, and his A1C, which is the marker for sugar control, over the previous 3 months was like, literally was like 14. So normal is less than 5.5, and this was 14. So it's very uncontrolled. So in my previous life, I would have probably been arrested or something if I didn't put that person on insulin, which is kind of the wrong approach. But I said, look, I have this program, why don't we engage? And I had to put him on a medication because, I had no choice. His sugar was a little too high. So, but I put him on an oral medication, not insulin. So in 2 months, his A1C had come down to 8. And then in 6 months, he's off all medications. His A1C is down to 6. And I couldn't believe it. he couldn't believe it. And just by doing these concepts.
So what did you tell him to do specifically? Go outside in the morning?
Yeah, our program is very
really dark at night.
Yeah, our program is very detailed. So it's like a prescription,
Okay.
But instead of saying, okay, take a Crestor 5 milligrams once a day, we say, light therapy. That's the first section. Light therapy, get up, sunrise, go barefoot, go grounding, depending on how that person's journey in their life is. We give, it's personalized, so we give different, but everybody gets that. Everybody has to get a sunrise, go grounding, get outside, take the sun at least 5 minutes during the day, and then at nighttime use the blue blockers or change your lighting, and then sleep in darkness. Gotta be done. There's no negotiation here.
Those be dark. Non-negotiables. Those are the foundational practices of regaining health or maintaining health. Yeah. Okay.
That's it. Yeah. Because if you want to be healthy and if you want to have healthy mitochondria, you got to have melatonin, and melatonin doesn't like light, doesn't like any light, but certainly not the blue light. So if it doesn't come out, then your repair mechanisms are not going to work well, and then eventually you build up sick cells, and then those sick cells can turn into something worse, like cancer or any chronic inflammatory disease. So that's the foundation. That's how we start our program, and then of course we also teach people on foods to eat based on what their tastes are, and keeping the concept of real food programmed by the sun and the earth. And sometimes we even go, not that I make any money by doing this, but we recommend specific brands of things that we use and that we eat in our house. Just because we know that they're good things to eat. And then, as far as exercise, there will be a point where probably if we keep growing the way we're growing, I would like to have like a exercise wing of Solimar, because I think it's important. But at this point, all we ask people to do is go outside and walk, if you can, barefoot, 3 times a week for 20 to 30 minutes every single day. But it's got to be outside, no sunscreen, the fewest clothes possible. Where right now it's cold, so that's a bummer. But certainly let that sunlight hit your eye. That's what we recommend everybody across the board. If they want to go to the gym or do cycling or do whatever they want, they can. But at the very minimum, that's what we ask them to do as far as exercise. So it's a pyramid, but everything is complementary. But the foundation is the circadian.
Right. So the young man with the crazy insulin levels showed improvement after a month, and he was showing normal at 6 months. Is that correct?
That's right.
Wow.
That's right. And then I also, that's one of the earlier cases and kind of dramatic, but the most dramatic case that we have now currently is a lady that I mentioned to you a couple of weeks ago with stage 4 colorectal cancer, inoperable. So, I sent her to Dana-Farber, it's top 3. Some people say it's the top cancer center in the world, and she's getting chemo. She's still getting chemotherapy. But what's really amazing about this story is I had a conversation with her. I said, look, this is not it's not an ideal situation, but it's not the end of the world. We have to do what we have to do as far as modern medicine is concerned. But you and I are going to work very closely together, and you're gonna promise me you're gonna do these things. So she did. So in her case, we actually designed her a diet which is kind of ketogenic, basically. And that comes from a Nobel Prize won by Otto Warburg in 1931 that says that cancer doesn't like sugar. I don't want to go into that tangent, but I mention it for a reason that I'll tell you at the end of the story. Is we are going to do that. You are going to wake up at sunrise. You're going to sleep in darkness, and you're going to go walk on the beach. She even bought grounding mats, grounding mattress, grounding shoes. Actually, the grounding shoes, as an aside, her mother now wants to buy the grounding shoes because they look pretty cool. So anyway, to make a long story short, her cancer, we do this type of X-ray called a PET scan, and the PET scan basically is a type of X-ray that when you have a cancer, it lights up in the area where you have a cancer. So in her PET scan, she had 3 different lesions in her liver, and she had a big lesion in her rectal area. And then we measure something called the CEA, which is a protein that cancer makes, and hers was very high. Hers started out like at 70. So she underwent the treatment. She underwent the everything, like, but to a T, everything that we recommended. And in 2 weeks, her protein marker came down from 70 to 30. In the third week, it had come down to 5, which is the normal range is from 0 to 5.
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it. And then after her 4th treatment, they did a PET scan, a follow-up PET scan after 4 treatments, and the lesions in the liver were gone, and the tumor in the rectum just lit up just like a little tiny lip. That's incredible. The interesting thing about this story is that they did a genetic analysis of the tumor itself to predict whether the chemotherapy that she was on, the protocol she was on, was going to be successful. And it turned out that it read less likely to be successful to that particular chemotherapy, which is still getting. So that is to say that it's not necessarily the chemotherapy. I think, I don't want to also say that she's cured, because she's, I can't say that. But all I can say is that she's responded in a way that even the cancer doctors couldn't believe. And the reason why I mentioned Otto Warburg in Nobel Prize 1931, that we know that cancer loves sugar. That's Nobel Prize. It's almost 100 years ago, and they're still giving Jello in the Cancer Center. They're still giving peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's like, I don't have 100 years to apply these new concepts with my patients. Thinking about the 2017 Nobel Prize about circadian biology, I can't wait until the medical system accepts this as a standard of care. I can't wait until the year 2300. It's like I only have so much lifetime. That's why I mentioned it.
It's true. Whenever I interview a doctor, a physician, a surgeon who has researched this, I ask, how long do you think until this is taught? And they say minimum 20 years. But the more people I talk to and the more stories I hear, I'm thinking, like, I don't know if this will ever be integrated to the traditional institutional medical education.
Yeah, it is frustrating, because we're talking about Nobel Prize. I mean, the work there's been books, papers published, yet the cancer centers are still giving candy, basically. It's like, okay, even the PET scan, the PET scan, all that is it lights up because we inject a radio label type of sugar. And the reason why it lights up is because the cancer loves it. It's like, I don't know. But
so
anyway. It does.
The truth
But
is obvious, and yet it gets ignored.
that is a remarkable story, though. That
Yeah,
is
that
really
is a truly remarkable story. And I love that, your approach is to harness the best of all possible knowledge, right? Like go to the best cancer treatment center you possibly can and, do get what they have to offer and
right.
restore your body to its natural state, which is we're not meant to have cancer. I mean, that's a state of
We're not.
And so
Yeah,
you were saying she was, extremely highly compliant with all of your recommendations in terms of going outside and doing all of those things.
absolutely. Yep. Extreme. Not even when I asked her to go grounding on the beach, walking on the beach, she even went inside into the ocean. Even now that it's cold, she for a little brief period, but
Right.
so all of these effects are cumulative. It's like, um, and your point is well taken. Is we need to understand the context of where we are in our environment and apply all we have available to get to a result that we want to get. So and that's basically what we do in the office, and that's what we're promoting with the Quantum Biology Collective.
Yeah. And that, as a patient, as someone who trusts in the medical system, as most people still do, although I think that's changing, we're losing our faith a little bit. I think we think that's what we're getting. And
Mhm.
yet, I now no longer go to doctors who work in the main, who work within the system. I have a pediatrician, and we do in-person wellness checks once a year for the children. And we see specialists as needed, but yeah, we use concierge medicine because I now know that I can't get this kind of quality advice from a doctor working in the system.
Yeah, I had noticed that it's been going on for quite a while. Actually, I had noticed that for almost a decade, where I felt there was kind of a disconnect between the expectation of the patient and what I was able to offer within the medical system, and it kind of like really I felt frustrated because I kind of sensed that and understood it that way, and I felt helpless, and but now I don't. Now I feel very happy.
That's so true. I didn't think about it from that perspective of yet another struggle of being a doctor, right? Is sensing that people are like, what, really? I mean, that was certainly me. I came to all of this information because I had chronic fatigue, and all my
Mhm.
primary care provider was like, no, your labs are good, you're fine. And I'm like, but I'm not fine. Like I don't
I
my
know.
quality of life is not good, and I don't have enough energy to get through the day. And they were like, yeah, okay, you whatever. And like, but you're right, that must be quite frustrating and disempowering to like be in that position with patient after patient. I didn't think about it that way.
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. That was something that really built. It adds up. All those things. The fact that I only got 5 to 10 minutes with every patient. Patients that have a laundry list of medications that I'm supposed to. I couldn't even like sit down and like say, well, maybe you don't need this anymore. You know what I mean? It's like, no, you got to move on to the next one. Otherwise, you never go home.
Wow. Okay. So let's switch gears a little. So we've, I think, done a really good job laying out the foundation of a quantum biologic circadian approach to health. And we've laid out how frustrating it can be to have an inkling of these other types of approaches and be constrained by a system if you're a doctor. So, okay. So you are at the point where you know that in order to practice medicine the way that you believe will best serve patients, you have to be independent. And this, I think, is a very difficult step for a lot of people to take, which I would completely understand if I was a doctor. I have a lot of empathy for that situation, because you basically have to start your own business, correct?
Mhm. That's correct.
And then you have to figure out the business model of how to structure it.
Correct.
And then you have to figure out how to have people come and use it. So
You have
could
to
you
market it.
sort of walk us through how you managed those phases of starting out as an independent medical practitioner business owner?
Sure. So, it came through the realization that I was not going to go back into the regular system. After COVID, I had a very good friend of mine that actually died from COVID,
Sorry.
and I decided, no, life is too short to be doing things that you don't believe wholeheartedly anymore. So that was it. So then, what I did in my particular case, it was a complete reset, because I had no job. I had some savings, but I ended up actually I lost. I mean, I sold. I sold my house. It happened in a time in my life, in my wife's life, where we could do it because our kids are grown. Our major commitment, which is our children, we had already passed that. So then I self-funded the startup, so to speak. But I did. It wasn't that big of an investment, because the beauty of doing what I'm doing is that our overhead is so low, because we don't have to hire anybody to go build insurance companies, or we don't have to. It's very clean. So. So the startup cost was not really that much, but I hired a company that actually helped me with the nitty gritty of setting up the office, like the website. They handle the website. I handle the content, but they designed the website under our direction. Things like I didn't know. If you've been working as a physician within the medical system and you take Medicare, you can't open up a shop and start charging like I'm charging, because then Medicare can come in and put you in jail. Because if you offer services that Medicare covers, and you charge out-of-pocket costs for those services to a Medicare patient, that's considered fraud. So all these things that I didn't know, this
Wow.
company, the system is really.
So this was their sort of area of expertise. They had specialized knowledge in how to help doctors set up this way to avoid pitfalls, such as going to jail for fraud.
Right, exactly. That would have been not a good start to the entrepreneur life.
Yeah.
So
okay, excellent. These are companies that exist. You didn't have to figure that all out on your own. You were able to hire these experts who could guide you through the process to make sure everything was set up soundly.
Yes, correct.
Okay, great, wonderful. Okay, so then what happened?
And I still use them for some marketing and some like administrative stuff. So then once we had all that set up, it was about 3 months. They actually helped me also find a brick and mortar place, our office, and it's fantastic. We got a great deal on the space. It's perfect for what we want to use for our purposes. Took about 3 months, and then we just opened. I haven't done much marketing. I wanted to reach out to the Hispanic community in Rhode Island for a lot of different reasons, but one of the major reasons is because I'm Hispanic, and being Hispanic in these latitudes north, of where we come from, put us at a higher risk of developing chronic disease, and we saw that with COVID.
And this is
I have
referring back to what you mentioned earlier about the mitochondrial haplotypes making
correct,
you be
right,
sort of more vulnerable in different environments.
correct. So diseases start when there's a mismatch between our biology and our environment. So by definition, all of us who come from a tropical or subtropical area and move to the northern latitudes, that's where the mismatch starts. So that means, doesn't mean that we can't live here. It just means that we have to account for that and be more, careful with our how we live our lives.
Right.
So going back to the business, so I have there's a significant radio station, Hispanic radio station here in Rhode Island, and I took an ad, and all the ad says basically, it doesn't say anything about what we've been talking about. All the ad says that I'm a doctor with 25 years of medical experience that doesn't take insurance, and come and is Hispanic, and then call for more information, and that's how we started. And then once they're here, once people come, they're here and they experience the service, they experience all these things that we've been talking about, then they become members. So it's been really that's been the journey. I haven't had to really do much. It's all about word of mouth, really. And then
And focusing on your community and and a portion of that community whose needs were not being well served by what else, by other options that were there.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Exactly. So, we're growing, and we have plans now to reach out more and be a little bit more specific, and because I really want to concentrate in doing this metabolic health based on circadian concepts and mitochondria. I can certainly treat sinus infections and all that stuff, but I really want to really focus our energy into that, into our program, because I think we're really moving the needle that way. But as far as the business is concerned, the beauty of this model is that because it's not fee for service, it's a membership.
Mm-hmm.
So that takes a lot of the stress out of the income. Once you hit a critical point where we are right now, I can take vacation. And, I'm not worried that I'm not in the office seeing patients, because it's a revolving revenue. So
right.
I am very much supportive of this model, because I think it serves the doctors and it serves the patients very well. And it's tailor-made for the primary care practices like internal medicine or family practice. But now you're seeing more and more like surgeons. They're opening up surgery centers with the same model, or GYNs with the same model.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Yeah.
So did the company that you worked with help you figure out that business model?
Yes, I didn't know about it when I was recovering from COVID, and I didn't have the appetite to go back to this. I just Googled alternatives, and they showed up. I mean, the direct primary care showed up, and I said, "Oh, well, this sounds interesting." So I Googled direct primary care. Boom, they showed up. I said, "Okay, this sounds interesting." So I set up a call with one of them, and the rest is history.
Wow. So I hope there's a lot of doctors listening, because this is a doable proposition. Now, would you consider, if there's doctors listening to this or who meet you somewhere and they're like, I really like what you do, but I just can't make the leap to starting my own business, but could I work for you? Could I open up an office in, Miami or Boise or somewhere else? Would you consider expanding that way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I consider every single thing that comes any opportunity, particularly with regards to the brand. How we apply the concepts. Because truth be told, that is really what's killing us, right? What's killing us is the metabolic diseases that come from this mismatch between biology and the environment. They did a study, and the statistic is remarkable. It's 90% of adult Americans, 90% have at least one feature of the metabolic syndrome. So 256 million people need this kind of service. Just think about it.
Yeah, it's true. And it's all of these chronic illnesses that they haven't gone as far as being a major crisis like cancer. They're like what I was talking about, chronic fatigue or Lyme disease or fibromyalgia or long COVID or, all of these sort of nebulous type illnesses that are crippling people's quality of life. But at the same time, there's no good answer at the doctor's office. Like there's really nothing. Like my doctor had nothing to offer me with this. It wasn't one of those situations where I'll take a little from here and a little from there. It was like, they just threw up their hands.
That's right. And that's a good point that I didn't mention. That's one of the ways how I kind of like offer our services. We do see some people that come. Most of the people that come through the doors don't come as members. They come. We have an offer of like a month's worth of membership for a fee to try us out. And then, but invariably, I do a physical examination and get the types of labs that I think would help me put into context that person's metabolic health.
Yeah.
And I show them right there. I show them, look, you have this amount of insulin, this vitamin D. Unfortunately, I don't have a pill to give you for this. But I'll tell them this is the reason why I founded this company, because I explained to them I have this program, and then they're sold into the idea because they understand that there is no pill. But by then, they've already experienced our service, and then they pretty much get sold, and then they see the results, and then they're hooked.
Absolutely. And I can say from my personal experience, when you find somebody that finally has some answers, like I'm very happy to pay a monthly fee to know that I have that person on my team when it comes to my health. And so I would imagine that's how your patients feel, right? Like the relief. We were talking earlier about the frustration and when people don't have answers, but the relief when people do have answers, and I can understand what changes to make and what to do to change my results. And I have someone working with me who also understands in the same way. Like it's very profound. And I wish for everybody to have that experience, which is why I'm so passionate about promoting all of it.
That's right.
Okay. So Dr. Gutierrez, as you know, we offer education in some of the basics of the science that you've been describing. So if there was a doctor in front of you who's like, yeah, I don't know, it sounds interesting, but should I do it? Should I make the leap? Should I study this stuff? Should I take this class? Should I take this certification and change my life? Like, what do you have to say to that person?
2017 Nobel Prize. I mean, what more can I say? I mean, this is solid science. I mean, I would say, look, just do some reading. I definitely did a lot of reading. The Mitochondria, the book by Nick Lane, Sex, Power, and Suicide, that was amazing to try to understand a little bit of the concepts about the electron transport chain. I love listening to him and reading his books. But yeah, I mean, go into the literature, go into, as far as trying to legitimize what we're saying is very simple. Just, type in red light and Parkinson's disease, or, type in low vitamin D and insulin resistance, or, type in earthing, grounding, and inflammation into PubMed, into the National Libraries of Medicine. That's what I did. When I started to, everything that comes out of my mouth, I tell patients here, it's all backed by clinical studies published in the same place where the drug companies publish their studies, their truth. Same place. I mean, it's all science. That's what I would say. I mean, don't believe me. Go and do your own due diligence, and you'll find out. I mean, I for a time last year I had a very frequent complaint of reflux disease. And I didn't know. I have many patients with reflux, and I didn't know if that could have any circadian. So I typed in reflux disease and circadian rhythm or something like that. Boom, like a plethora of studies, like a beautiful review, and say, oh yeah, everything is tied to our mitochondria and circadian rhythms. It's all there. I mean, and literature and more papers are being published over and over and over and over. So that would be from the science standpoint. Do your own diligence. This is scientific. This is something that you could use for your own life, but also for your patients. And from the business standpoint, there's no comparison. I mean, the only comparison right now, this moment, is I'm not making the same amount of money the same paycheck I was making before, but I'm close, and I'm going to make even more. So, but as far as the trade-off for quality of life, there's no comparison. No comparison. That, just to give you an example, since we opened in July 2021, I've already taken like almost 10 vacations, which that did not.
Wow. Oh my God. That right there. There's the
that did not happen. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it takes a leap of faith. You have to be organized. You have to know what you're doing, just so you don't get in trouble at the beginning. You have to understand that when you start any venture, any business, there's a risk involved. But boy, let me tell you, as far as quality of life, it's a risk worth taking.
Wow. Well, on that note, thank you so much for spending time with us today and sharing your journey. It's truly remarkable, and I hope that it helps a lot of people. I think, we all need role models. It's very hard to go where no one's gone before. It's hard to envision it. It's hard to see it. So thank you for sharing your story and providing that for a lot of people.
Well, no, thank you for having me. I'm very much passionate about what we're doing with the Quantum Biology Collective and educating people. And I really am excited to have more NDs on board into this paradigm, because as Dr. Hernandez said it when we did the Spanish podcast, this is the future. This is exactly how everybody's going to be practicing medicine, or at least what the people are going to start demanding, the patients are going to start demanding. So, I'm very thankful to you for letting me, share with you and the audience my little journey into this.
Oh, we deeply appreciate it. And we'll have you back soon. There's so many more topics we could go deep on. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Right. Take care.
This has been the Quantum Biology Collective podcast. To find a practitioner who practices from this point of view, visit our directory at quantumbiologycollective.org. If you are a practitioner, definitely take a look at the Applied Quantum Biology Certification, a 6-week study of the science of the new human health paradigm and its practical application with your patients and clients. We also love to feature graduates of the program on this very podcast. Until next time, the QBC.